At some point in the last 6 months, I called a salad bright for the first time. It was a term I had never heard before my girlfriend forced upon me a steady diet of cooking shows. Chopped, Iron Chef, and its zillion offshoots, Cutthroat Kitchen. Hulu has got quite the selection, as it turns out. They've never really been my thing, but I have nonetheless come to enjoy them as an alternative sort of entertainment. There's no need to get invested in characters or storylines or mechanics. When we're just trying to pass the time with some extra sights and sounds, those from a well-stocked kitchen work fine. And it has changed the way that I think about and eat food, although I remain entirely disinterested in cooking anything more complicated than a stir-fry. It's just not a relaxing or stress-relieving thing for me the way it is for some people. And the small size of this apartment, mixed with New York City grocery store prices, mean it's often more economical for me to just pay someone else to do it for me better. But now I critique their work with a newfound vocabulary, considering textures and complementary flavors, understanding what made that salad bright. And of course, there is the other side to that, which is baking, with the Great British Bake Off / baking show being the general cultural darling of our time, as we oh so wholesomely follow a dozen amateur bakers in their 2 months in the tent. What makes Bake Off so lovely is the removal of money and what that does, because it turns the competition into something friendly. No one wants to go home, but the difference between doing so and not isn't the difference between winning $10,000 and nothing. Hell, the longer you go, the more money you lose. I find it vaguely abhorrent that such a wildly successful show won't even fund the practice bakes that it requires the contestants to do during the week. But by ensuring that everyone involved is bare minimum middle class, Bake Off creates a sort of fundamental calm. The only struggle anyone ever has is what is happening in the tent, which is exactly what we as the audience want. These are people with stable jobs and home lives. Plus, being in Britain, they're not constantly worried about their health insurance. Imagine that. But the last season signaled a shift in the tone, particularly in its final episode. We had spent literal months being led to expect an easy victory for Steph, and then saw the rug pulled out from under everyone. David won, which was a genuine surprise because he had been presented as someone struggling nearly every week. And yeah, he is the first winner to never be named Star Baker, but the people to blame for this apparent upset are not Paul and Prue, but the producers. They knew the outcome, and yet edited the show for maximum drama and shock for the sake of it. The arc is substantially worse as a result. They brought Steph up and up and up so that they could tear her down in the finale. There are more tears in that episode than seemingly every other one combined, and they go really hard on how upset she is that her parents may not be able to make it, including having the host basically mock her for her stress and voiceover. It's the kind of thing that you would have never seen in an earlier season of a show that is lauded particularly because it doesn't do things like that. But here we are. The nicest show on television got kinda mean. And not the fun kind. If I want to watch the fun kind of mean, I'll turn on Netflix's other big baking series. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week Air Review. You can call me so much less than amateur, and today I'm talking about Nailed It, the 4th season of which landed on Netflix last week. Nailed It is ostensibly a cooking show in the vein of Chopped, or I guess Cake Wars, with each episode featuring a new trio vying for a trophy and a grand prize of $10,000. But it's much friendlier than that would make you think. Much of this comes down to the choice of contestants. Like Bake Off, everyone on Nailed It is an amateur. Unlike Bake Off, no one on Nailed It is particularly good, and that's the point. These 3 people who know that they're pretty bad at baking come in and are given 2 impossible tasks. First, Baker's choice is to recreate a cookie or cake pop or some equivalent pastry with a beautifully intricate design. They get to take a reference model and are given the relevant recipes, but they rarely get more than 45 minutes. it's not enough. Hell, it wouldn't be enough for a professional to totally nail all of the little details, and the results often taste bad and look even worse. Interestingly, the main host would likely struggle here as well. Nicole Byer is a comedian, actor, podcaster, and someone of whom I am very much a fan, but acclaimed baker she is not. She is there to set the tone and keep things silly, while her co-host, pastry chef and self-proclaimed Mr. Chocolate, Jacques Torres, is there to actually judge the quality of the baking and add a bit of Frenchness, some je ne sais quoi, if you will, to the proceedings. Their wildly divergent energies and knowledge bases serve as a rock-solid foundation for the show, and as the seasons have progressed, their banter has become increasingly adorable, and is now as much a reason to watch the show as the baking itself. Playing into Nailed It's comedy angle, the guest judges are typically also comedians and actors. But every so often, another pastry chef will take the spot to offer insight into the process or perhaps help the bakers along. That last point's important because unlike most competitions, the loser of the first round doesn't go home. Indeed, there is actually a strategic benefit to failing out of the gate if your real goal is the final crown. Although the winner of Baker's Choice gets a stand mixer or hilariously large cake decoration set, or in one episode this season, a Keytar, round 2, nail it or fail it, is always a fresh start. There, contestants have 2 hours or less to recreate an incredibly complex cake with numerous parts that require all kinds of decorating skills, and once again, it's completely impossible. But they're not entirely thrown to the wolves in quite the same way. Everyone gets a panic button where either Torres or a guest chef, if there is one, will offer advice on how to proceed, honestly answering whatever questions the contestant may have for up to 3 minutes. The worst performer of the first round will also get some type of sabotage, taking the others away from their bakes for 3 minutes to lasso a cactus or listen to Nicole Byer read from Moby Dick. And given what people are supposed to be putting together in that amount of time, 3 minutes can actually be the difference between the worst looking cake and the best. But let's be honest, there's very little strategy in all of this. No one's really playing the game, running the sabotage to maximize impact, just as people would be taking their cakes out of the oven and guaranteeing everything is overbaked. They just do it when they get overwhelmed. And that's fine. The people who fail in that first round rarely take the second, because typically they're just the worst bakers, though an upset does happen from time to time. But this actually gets back at a bigger picture comparison to Bake Off, which is that the money is not presented as a big deal. Like Bake Off, the people on Nailed It tend to be gainfully employed and have families who love them, but don't necessarily like their cooking. I have no doubt that $10,000 would mean a lot to most of them. But if they're talking about it in their little confessionals, that almost never makes it to the final edit. And when someone else wins, those who lose seem genuinely happy for the victor, cheering or even hugging them. Any bad blood that may have been present is on the cutting room floor. And the show is much better for it. But wait, you may be thinking, didn't I say that Nailed It is kind of mean? Yes, of course it is. It just doesn't come from the contestants. It is directed at them by the judges. And this goes straight back to the premise. Every bake sets each baker up to fail. The question is not who will do well, but who will do the least badly. The point of the show is to laugh at, not with, these bakers, who presumably are doing their best. The reveal of each bake, along with the contestants' nailed it, is inevitably met with a giggle/snort and usually an "I love it" from Byer. But the thing she loves about it is not that it's good, it's just that it's so unexpected in its badness. Sometimes she apologizes for laughing, often she doesn't. But her presence makes this fundamentally different than your typical train wreck show. Take everyone's current obsession, Tiger King. It's a show that we as the audience are meant to constantly stop and think, wow, look at how wild and crazy everyone is. But Did those actual human beings sign those release forms knowing that they were effectively making themselves into the animals for all of us to gawk at? Unlikely. The filmmakers turned them into objects of our amusement without them knowing it, and that's not great. Though if I really felt that way, maybe I shouldn't have watched it all the way through and then told everyone I knew to do the same thing. Oops. Nailed It offers no pretenses. We may be laughing at these people, but we're given permission to do so by our audience surrogate. When Nicole Byer laughs in someone's face because they're bad, it means that we can do so too without feeling bad. And let's be real, they know what they're in for. We're 4 seasons and several spin-offs into this thing. No one has any excuse for not being prepared to get roasted for the enjoyment of the masses. Or I guess being any kind of prepared at all. The thing that's so shocking about the show is that people still come into it without many of the fundamentals. We've established that I don't know a whole lot about cooking. But I've always known the difference between a tablespoon and a teaspoon. And apparently that's not common knowledge. This makes Nailed It an actually useful tool for someone who wants some of the very basics in a way that Bake Off isn't. Because folks in the latter come in with a base of knowledge that Nailed It contestants clearly just don't have. Bake Off will teach you slightly more complicated things, where Nailed It will hammer home how to make royal icing, or why you should use a convection oven, or the fact that you should always put cornstarch down before rolling out fondant. None of this knowledge is going to benefit me in my life, because I am unlikely to ever make royal icing, own a convection oven, or even so much as look at fondant. So all this has done is make me judgier about the people on this show. Every time I see someone put a cake in the lower oven on the set, which we should all know by now is the conventional oven, I shake my head. That's not where that goes, I groan. Haven't they watched the show? But that's the fun in it. That's why the bakes get ever more elaborate, and the bakers have just as little time to complete them. Maximum hilarity. But there is a point at which it will become too much, and I think the show is getting close, where it is so impossible that what we ultimately see is just too far removed from the original to even be funny anymore. It's a fine line, and one that so far they've walked reasonably well, but sometimes I also wonder what would happen if they got a few extra minutes. How good could these bad bakers actually be if they were given even the slightest chance to actually, nail it? I don't know. And that's kind of a shame. 7.9 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamry and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, @BlasianFMA, Magnolia Denton, and Elliot Fowler. If you like this video, it's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you next week.